Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu, sitting in for Riz Khan. A deadly series of blasts across Pakistan is adding urgency to its fight against militant groups, just as a huge new aid package from Washington to Islamabad is approved. Hundreds of thousands have fled Pakistan's border regions in recent weeks in anticipation of a bloody confrontation between the military and the Taliban in the rebel stronghold of Waziristan. It's been delayed for months while military commanders determine the best moment to launch the ground strike. Pakistan's Prime Minister says his government will react to the latest anti-government violence at, quote, the appropriate time. But the growing number of insurgent strikes across the country may push the military into action sooner rather than later. 161 people have been killed in 9 separate attacks over the last 10 days alone. To help strengthen the country, US President Barack Obama signed a controversial bill on Thursday giving Pakistan $7.5 billion over the next 5 years in non-military aid. So today we ask, how can Pakistan quell its internal war with militant groups? A reminder, we welcome your phone calls and emails during the show. Joining me here in Washington to discuss the situation is Saha Shafkat, a professor at St. Mary's College of Maryland, specializing in Pakistani politics, women's issues and ethnic conflict. Dr. Shafkat is also a member of Action for Progressive Pakistan, an activist group pushing for changes in US policy towards the country. Also with us, Robert Grenier, a political analyst, security consultant and former CIA station chief in Islamabad, where he helped plan covert operations supporting the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Dr. Shafkat, let's start with you. Ladies first. Just a few weeks ago, Pakistani leaders, military top brass were telling us about their great success in the Swat Valley and the military offensive there. Now, weeks later, there have been a string of attacks resulting in many, many deaths. Is the Pakistani government now on the defensive?
I think they're clearly on the defensive, and I think these attacks are definitely these recent attacks are definitely sort of a reaction to the army's proposed intervention into the Waziristan area. But I think the bigger picture from my perspective is that this sort of back and forth of violence just simply indicates the ultimate failure of a strategy that is premised solely on military action, to the exclusion of addressing other concerns that the Pakistani people have, for example, unemployment, illiteracy, women's rights, etc.
This aid package should go towards rectifying that, wouldn't it?
This aid package is one step, but unfortunately it still is combined with military aid, and as you know, there's been a lot of unhappiness in Pakistan and elsewhere about the conditionalities attached to it, which is a violation of Pakistani sovereignty, and doesn't really address what is ultimately social and political problems that Pakistanis themselves have to fix.
Robert Grenier, you agree the approach is wrong?
Well, I do agree that there are both political and economic elements that need to be brought together by the government of Pakistan as part of a comprehensive package, that military action alone is not going to fix this problem for Pakistan, for Afghanistan, or for their allies as well. But that said, I think that military action needs to be part of the overall package. I think that there is a fight that's brewing here, and it's one from which the government of Pakistan should not shrink.
Do you think the Pakistani military have a valid complaint when they say that this package, with its conditions attached to it, and let's look at some of those conditions. We have, there's to be an end to illegal nuclear proliferation networks, no more support for militant groups, and a third condition there, the US Embassy monitors and distributes funds on this aid package. Do they have a valid complaint when they say, look, this is compromising Pakistani sovereignty?
Well, I think that they do to a certain extent. I think that these sorts of conditions, if you will, are probably best confined to quiet dialogue between the two governments. I think the problem for the army and for the political class in Pakistan is that when these things are published in an open way, it's rather hard for them to swallow, particularly in the context of domestic politics in Pakistan.
Dr. Shafkat, we've now heard the Pakistani government say that they will launch that ground offensive in Waziristan. There's 2 divisions already been sent, 28,000 men. What do they plan to achieve there?
Well, again, the hope, of course, is to focus on the military offensive and to wipe out the Taliban, particularly the Masood clan, which has proved to be so troublesome to the Pakistani army. But again, I want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is that kind of continuing to depend on a policy that partners with the Pakistani military is, in my view, a flawed strategy. This is a Pakistani military that has shown that it is undependable. It has unfortunately never had the interests of the Pakistani people in mind, only sort of focused on its own narrow interests. And I fear that we will continue to see sort of an increase in the spiral of violence rather than a decrease.
Robert Grenier, as the White House looks at this, the events of the past few weeks, all these attacks, how much sleep are they losing?
Well, I think that I suspect that they are focusing very heavily on the Pakistan side of the Afghanistan-Pakistan equation right now. And as has been underscored several times in the recent past, when forced to choose between its interests in Afghanistan and Pakistan, I think it has dawned on those in the White House that we actually, as a country, have far greater interests in Pakistan, and that a destabilized Pakistan poses a much greater threat to our interests than would be the case in Afghanistan.
We've got an email here which has come through. We have several emails. The one email was what you talked about. It says the government of Pakistan should give up its military offensive in the Waziristan region and must try to solve the problem through dialogue with the tribal leaders in the region. That's from Jamal Shifa. Has the central government lost contact with tribal leaders?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think that part of what we're seeing now is that the United States would like to very much see certain kinds of military action in Pakistan. But I also think that, this is part of the unfortunate sort of double game that the military has been playing, which is a half-hearted assault against militants, pull back, then resumption of dialogue, and then the sort of cycle goes back and forth. And again, it's the Pakistani people that end up suffering in all of this. Now, I want to be very clear about one thing. I certainly do not support the militants. That's not what I'm saying here at all. My interest is in making sure that extremism in Pakistan is gone once and for all, but my concern is that a policy that focuses simply on the military strategy is flawed, is not going to do the trick.
Robert Grenier, what do you think is driving the militants? What's motivating them? Because we've heard that they're growing in strength. The Pakistani military had a briefing just on Tuesday in which they said, look, at one time the militants were confined to the northwestern borderlands, but now we're seeing their tentacles reach out into the heartland of Pakistan.
Well, I don't think it's just a matter of the militants who are based in the northwest or the tribal region somehow pushing their tentacles out into other parts of the country. I think it's actually much more menacing than that. There are other extremist groups who heretofore have had very separate agendas, who have been focused, for instance, either on attacks on Shia or who have been focused on Kashmir. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing a coalescence of these different forces within the country. They now see this as a common fight, a common struggle. They're coordinating their activities as far as we can tell, and therefore they pose a much greater threat to the government and the people of Pakistan.
Do you think that the most recent attacks that we've seen is actually a warning to the government over its very imminent offensive in South Waziristan?
I think very much. I suspect that to some degree the militants would like to avoid a fight to the end with the army and with the security forces. But I think that they're passing a very clear message that if you launch this offensive into South Waziristan, you're going to have to face all of us united. You won't have the luxury of taking us in sequence. And that a war in Afghanistan will be seen as a war on what we would brand Islamic extremism throughout the country. That's the message that they're trying to pass.
Dr. Shafkat asked earlier on whether they'd be losing sleep in the White House. Will they be losing sleep in Islamabad?
Over these attacks, you mean?
Over the latest turn of events?
Absolutely, yes, I think so. Part of this is also that the army is very displeased that there is now finally from the United States some attention being paid to the non-military needs of Pakistan. And I think certainly there's a lot of sleep being lost in Rawalpindi, which is the headquarters of the Pakistani military. But I think, the sort of larger issue here is that you have a government in Pakistan, in Islamabad, that is being forced to be more attentive to the concerns of the United States rather than the concerns of its own people. And we need to sort of strengthen a mechanism within Pakistan that focuses on process, that focuses on supporting a responsive government that cares about the needs of its people, rather than simply focusing on military strategies.
Well then, in the short term, give me your best case scenario. If you were sitting at the table, say at the National Security Council or the State Department or the CIA for that matter, what's the bit of advice that you'd give them right at the top?
Well, I would sort of look at the big picture since 2001, and I would look at the empirical evidence which shows that as US intervention in Pakistan has increased, violence in Pakistan has also increased, including this kind of terrorist violence. You know, suicide attacks in Pakistan were unknown until 2002. So I would do a very serious rethink of what we've been doing there thus far.
And in fact, there was a survey done just a few months ago in which Pakistanis considered the United States to be the greatest danger within the country.
Right.
We have to take a short break now. As we pause, let me remind you that you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debate taking place there right now. We'll be right back.